Dear colleagues,
kollegor, ers excellenser, ärade gäster, mina damer och herrar. Jag skulle vilja säga att ni är alla välkomna till riksdagen och det som en gång var den andra kammaren, där vi nu ska hålla den internationella Krimplattformens 4:e parlamentariska toppmöte. Jag skulle vilja tacka artisterna som sjöng våra nationalsånger, Timo Vasiliushin och Fankin Shu. Född i Ukraina har Tumor, som nu bor i Sverige. Han har blivit en stark röst som stödjer sitt hemland, och varje vecka sjunger han på måndagsrörelsens möte på Norrmalmstorg, ett stenkast härifrån. Måndagsrörelsen har arrangerat möten för att stödja Ukraina varje vecka sedan den fullskaliga invasionens början. Ett mäktigt exempel på solidaritet som stockholmarna och Sverige visar folket i Ukraina. I den här kammaren är vi omgärdade av väggmålningar av olika scener ur den svenska historien. Det är här vi hedrar våra hjältar som har spelat en viktig roll i att försvara vårt lands självständighet och frihet. Och det faktum att man valde att använda just dessa scener ur den svenska historien visar en vilja att understryka värdet av människors rätt att delta i beslutsfattandet vad gäller offentliga angelägenheter, värdet av en fri och självständig nation och viljan att försvara dessa värderingar när helst de hotas av främmande makt. När man skriver historia om hur ukrainarna modigt försvarade sin nation, sin självständighet och sin demokrati mot den ryska invasionen, kommer liknande scener att gestaltas. För det är det Ukrainas kamp handlar om. Rätten att välja sitt eget öde som folk. Min kära vän Ruslan Stefanchuk, jag minns det tal du gav i den här salen våren 2023. Då hade Rysslands fullskaliga invasion i Ukraina pågått i lite över ett år. Och detta är nu 4:e året. I ditt tal underströk du den roll Sverige spelade för över 300 år sedan under Zaporogernas kamp för ett självständigt Ukraina. När vi träffas här idag för att än en gång uttrycka vårt stöd för Ukrainas kamp för självständighet och territoriell integritet och varaktig fred, så bygger det på historiska erfarenheter. Alliansen då grundade sig det faktum att våra länder hade gemensamma intressen. Då som nu var det stormakter som ville erövra nya territorier. Då som nu förstod ledarna i våra länder att det enda sättet för länder att överleva som självständiga stater var genom att försöka stävja alla imperialistiska ambitioner hos stormakterna tillsammans. Ruslan, jag är så glad att få se dig här i riksdagen igen och stolt över att få stå värd för det här viktiga mötet tillsammans med dig. Jag är också glad att ledamöter från så många parlament har samlats här idag, nästan 70, inklusive de som kommer att delta på distans. Det här breda stödet visar att det finns många som ställer sig bakom Ukrainas kamp för frihet, sin territoriella integritet och sin kamp för varaktig fred. Och det visar att det är många av oss som förstår vikten av att försvara den regelbaserade världsordningen och principen att man inte attackerar andra länder för att erövra mark. En av dagens talare är Ukrainas president Volodymyr Zelensky, som kommer att delta på distans. Och vi ska alla vara tacksamma till honom för hans fantastiska enastående ledarskap under den här tiderna. Han kommer gå till historien som en av de främsta politiska ledarna under 2000-talet. Tidigare nämnde jag hjältarna ur den svenska historien. Ibland sägs det att hjältarnas tid är förbi. Men man brukar känna igen hjälten när man ser den. Och man ser Volodymyr Zelensky för det han är, en sann hjälte. Ja, vi lever i svåra osäkra tider, men vi får inte känna hopplöshet. Historien har lärt oss ändå att i slutändan är demokrati och frihet starkare än deras fiender. Starkare på grund av att de har den moraliska överhanden, men idag också för att de är starkare i materiella termer. Detta har vi tidigare sett vara avgörande i utdragna militära kraftmätningar. Det är därför vi samlas här idag, för att åter bekräfta solidariteten mellan fria och självständiga nationer. Vi gör det med vetskapen om att hotet mot Ukrainas frihet är också ett hot mot våra länder. Vi lever åter i en tid
Dear colleagues, excellencies, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to bid you all a very warm welcome to the Riksdag and to the former second chamber, the venue of the fourth parliamentary summit of the international Crimea Platform. I would first like to thank the performers of the national anthems, Timur Vasilyshin and Funking. Timur was born in Ukraine and lives in Sweden now, and he has become a powerful voice in support of his homeland and performs every week at the Monday meetings at the square of Norrmalmstorg, not far from here. The Monday meetings have been organized in support of Ukraine every week since the full-scale invasion began, a powerful example of solidarity of the people of Stockholm and Sweden with the people of Ukraine. In this chamber, we are surrounded by murals depicting scenes from Swedish history. It is here that heroes who played an important role in defending our nation's independence and freedom are honored. The fact that the choice was made to highlight these scenes from Swedish history is an expression of the will to emphasize the value of the right of the people to participate in decision-making on public affairs, the value of a free and independent nation, and the will to defend these values when they are threatened by foreign powers. Once history is written about how the Ukrainian people heroically defended their nation, their independence and their democracy against the Russian invasions, there will be similar scenes to be portrayed. For this is what Ukraine's struggle is all about, the right of a people to choose its own destiny. My dear friend Ruslan Stefanchuk, I remember the speech you gave in this chamber in the spring of 2023. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine had been going on for more than a year. It is now in its fourth year. In your speech, you highlighted the role Sweden played more than 3 centuries ago in the Zaporizhian Cossack struggle for an independent Ukraine. When we meet here today to once again express our support for Ukraine's struggle for independence, territorial integrity and a just and lasting peace, we thus build on historical experiences. The alliance at that time was based on the fact that our countries had common interests. Then as now, there were great powers that wanted to take over new territories. Then as now, leaders in our countries realized that the only way for countries wanting to survive as independent nations is to try and stem the imperial ambitions of the great powers together. Ruslan, I'm so happy to see you here again in the Riksdag today and proud to host this important meeting together with you. I'm also happy that representatives of almost 70 parliaments have joined us today, including those who will participate online. This broad support shows that there are many of us who stand behind Ukraine's struggle for its freedom, its territorial integrity, and its quest for a just and lasting peace. And it shows that many of us recognize the importance of defending the rules-based world order and the principle that one does not attack other countries in order to conquer territory. Another of our speakers today is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who will be with us online. I think we should all be thankful for President Zelensky's outstanding leadership in these trying times. He will go down in history as one of the greatest political leaders of the 21st century. Earlier, I spoke about heroes from our Swedish history. Sometimes it's said that the time of heroes is over, but people usually recognize a hero when they see one, and they see Volodymyr Zelensky for what he is, a true hero. Yes, we live in difficult and uncertain times, but we must not feel a sense of hopelessness. History has taught us that democracy and freedom are ultimately stronger than its enemies, their enemies. Stronger by virtue of moral superiority, but today also clearly stronger in material terms. This has previously proved to be crucial in protracted military showdowns. This is why we gather today to reconfirm solidarity between free and independent nations. We do this in the knowledge that the threat to Ukraine's freedom and territorial integrity is also a threat to our nations. For we are once again living at a time when we need to be constantly prepared to light the beacons. We must not only be prepared to support Ukraine's fight for freedom, we must also be prepared to defend all of Europe against Russian aggression that threatens the territorial integrity of also our nations. Together we are stronger than the enemies of democracy and freedom. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 4th Parliamentary Summit of the International Crimea Platform. Thank you. Distinguished guests, it is now my great honor to welcome the President of Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky, who is joining us remotely from Ukraine. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Sweden, Honorable Mr. Speaker, and all the friends, dear Ruslan. I'm glad that the Ukrainian Crimean Platform and its parliamentary track continues to work and keeps attention on a simple truth. Every nation and every state must be respected, and the core principle that kept Europe peaceful longer than at any other time in its history must be protected. These principles are clear: respect for human life, no changing borders by force, and no spheres of influence, a polite term used to cover the desire to dominate other nations and wage wars of aggression. This is exactly what the Crimean Platform stands for, refusing to accept that launching wars of conquest is normal and refusing to normalize cruelty toward people and nations. Thank you for taking this principled position and for clearly stating that the annexation of Crimea in 2014 was illegal. We all understand the global reality. In a world of hundreds of nations, there are thousands of potential wars, some frozen, of course, some hidden under old deals, some still smoldering. But in most cases, peace is upheld by international law, by conventions, agreements, and the UN Charter. If these principles do not work here in Europe, then where will they work? It is a rhetorical question, and behind it lies a global fear that war, not peace, could again become humanity's everyday reality, as in darker times. We cannot allow this. Right now, we are at a critical moment, and we are working closely with the United States, with European partners, with many others to define steps that can end Russia's war against us, against Ukraine, and bring real security. And there is a lot of noise in the media, a lot of political pressure, and even greater responsibility for the decisions ahead. Putin wants legal recognition for what he has stolen, to break the principle of territorial integrity and sovereignty. And that's the main problem. You all understand what that means. He wants it not only from Ukraine, he wants it from the whole world, and it's very dangerous. And I want to stress one more thing. In the steps we have coordinated with the side of the US, we managed to keep extremely sensitive points on the table, including the full release of all Ukrainian prisoners of war under the all for all formula, and civilians, and the complete return of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. These are important steps, but to achieve real peace, more is needed. Of course, we all continue working with partners, especially the United States, and look for compromises that strengthen but not weaken us. And we will continue explaining how dangerous it is to pretend that aggression is something one can simply overlook and move on. And I ask you, do not stay silent. Do not be passive observers of history. Be participants. It is important to support Ukraine now, and I thank you for that support. It is important to support the negotiation process, and I am grateful for every piece of advice and every bit of information we receive from European leaders. And it is crucial to support the principles on which Europe stands, that borders cannot be changed by force, that war criminals must not escape justice, and that the aggressor must pay fully for the war he started. And this is why decisions on Russian assets are essential. Please support these decisions, and above all, keep pressure on Russia. Russia is still killing people every day. Occupied territories remain occupied. And that means Russia remains a criminal state. Today, almost 70 parliamentary delegations are present. And if parliaments in Europe, in the world, do not close their eyes to this, then no one will. Thank you for your support. Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, I just encourage you to use the headphones. I'll speak in Ukrainian, and please use the interpreter.
Dear Mr. President Zelensky, dear Andreas, honorable speakers, honorable heads of delegations, honorable Madam Minister, dear friends. First of all, allow me to sincerely thank our Swedish partners and friends for the warmth and hospitality in this cold time of year, as well as for the exceptionally high level of organization of this traditional forum. And I'm particularly grateful to a great friend of Ukraine, Speaker Norlen, for the decision to host this year's 4th Parliamentary Summit of the International Crimea Platform. And I'm pleased to see among the constant participants of our gathering the heads of parliaments of Croatia, Czechia, Latvia, who hosted the 3 previous summits. And I'm grateful to each person present in this hall, not only for coming to Stockholm. I'm sincerely grateful for the enormous assistance that your countries have been consistently providing to Ukraine for almost 4 years now, since the moment of Russia's full-scale aggression against Ukraine. I want to thank you on behalf of the Ukrainian people, on behalf of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, on behalf of the representative Ukrainian delegation present here today in this hall, and they represent all factions and groups of the Ukrainian parliament. Friends, today we have gathered to speak about Crimea, and we will speak about how Russia is turning the Crimean Peninsula into a military base used in its aggression against Ukraine. how Ukrainian schools are being shut down in Crimea annexed by Russia, how Russia's shadow fleet is exporting grain stolen from Ukraine from Crimean ports, how those citizens who disagree with the regime's actions are being persecuted, and how proud we are of those who, representing different peoples, never cease fighting and continue resisting the actions of the Russian occupation administration. But this is not everything we will speak about today. Today we will also speak about how to jointly stop the Russian aggression, how to put an end to the desecration of the international law, and also about what, after all, the peace plan for Ukraine must be like. Dear friends, as you know, last Thursday in Kiev we officially received from the American delegation a draft plan concerning the ending of the war. We agreed that our teams would work on these proposals, and yesterday our delegation held the first round of negotiations with the American partners. And as President of Ukraine Zelensky said yesterday evening, there are signals that President Trump's team is hearing us. And we are ready to move towards a genuine peace, and we've always said that, but allow me to set out our key principles and priorities. You know that from the very first day of the war, Ukraine has been striving for a peace that respects our independence, sovereignty, and our dignity. Ukraine is ready for substantive negotiations on ending the war, including at the level of leaders. At the same time, we must designate the Ukrainian red lines, which no one has the right to cross, neither physically, nor legally, nor morally. No legal recognition of the Russian occupation of Ukrainian territories, no restrictions on Ukraine's defense forces, no veto on Ukraine's right to choose its future alliances. Any genuine peace process must be based on a very clear principle: nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, and nothing about Europe without Europe. Yes, and we will never renounce our own language, our faith, or our national identity. Yesterday, during a tour of the Riksdag, Speaker Norlen showed me the first constitution in Ukraine, and thus in the world, of the Ukrainian Hetman Pilip Orlek, which was dated, just think about it, to 1710. Dear friends, the presence of this unique Ukrainian document within the walls of the Swedish Riksdag holds deep symbolism and great meaning for me as a lawyer and as a citizen of Ukraine. Because the constitution and the will of one's own people are yet another red line that no one may ever violate. I am convinced that an important component of a real peace plan, which will inevitably lead to ending the Russian aggression, is strengthening Ukraine's defense capabilities of Ukraine and Europe, reliably protecting Ukraine's skies, and safeguarding critical infrastructure. Therefore, your consolidated and unconditional support for Ukraine as a victim of aggression, dear friends, is an important, if not the key element of a peace plan. We need to move forward in the process of finalizing and providing Ukraine with reliable security guarantees from recognized world democracies, the United Europe and the United States of America. On the other hand, we must maximize sanctions pressure on Russia until Putin is ready to conclude peace. And it would be just to use Russia's frozen assets, because this is the price for aggression, and the price for the lives taken, and the price for the destruction inflicted. We sincerely believe that on the 18th, 19th of December, the Council of the European Union will adopt fair decisions on this matter. Besides, Ukraine's membership in the European Union and NATO must also be elements of both Ukraine's security guarantees and the peace plan. Only under these conditions will Russia retreat, because it will finally understand that it cannot overcome and sees Ukraine as an integrated part of the democratic world. That Ukraine, once and for all, has become part of the world where there is no place for tyranny and where democracy prevails. We sincerely believe that the consolidated strength of our partners can truly bring this peace that we all long for closer to us. And dear friends, we have no right to waste this chance. So I ask each and every one of you to use your own capabilities while working with our partners, the US administration and Congress, the European Parliament and parliaments of other countries of the world, to achieve this result. Dear friends, a decisive moment in our struggle is approaching. The struggle for Ukraine, the struggle for Europe, the struggle for a lasting and just peace. We are under enormous pressure from the enemy, from its deceitful propaganda, under the enormous pressure of fatigue and losses. But friends, let's be honest. There's another pressure that does not allow us to surrender to the enemy's mercy and cease fighting. And this pressure is far greater, because this is the pressure of our own conscience. It is the pressure of the memory of all our victims and all our suffering. It is the pressure of responsibility, joint responsibility for the future, and it is the pressure of our dignity. And this pressure will not allow us to retreat. So thank you for your attention, and glory to Ukraine.
Distinguished guests, dear friends, allow me to welcome our next speakers to lecture, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, Ms. Maria Malmer Stenergard. Dear Madam Minister, the floor is yours.
Honorable speakers, excellencies, distinguished guests, it is an honor to address this summit. First, let me just say a few words about the intense diplomacy that we've seen in the last couple of days. Ukraine has always shown that it is serious about achieving a just and lasting peace. Russia has not. Ukraine has offered full, unconditional ceasefire. Russia has not. Ukraine has always been ready to negotiate. Russia has not. Since Russia has not changed its position, neither has Sweden nor the EU. Our position remains that to achieve a just and lasting peace, borders cannot be changed by force. There cannot be limitations on Ukraine's armed forces that will invite further Russian aggression. And there cannot be any limitations on the full sovereign rights of the Ukrainian people to choose their own path, which includes the path to EU membership. An agreement that includes those main elements, that truly respects Ukraine's sovereignty and that has the support of its people, such an agreement will also have our support. But as long as the Russian aggression continues, Sweden has a clear two-point plan to strengthen Ukraine and weaken Russia. You can count on our support. Let me also acknowledge that World Children's Day took place last week. That made me think of the many thousands of Ukrainian children that Russia has forcibly taken away from their homes. That maybe made me think of Sashko from Mariupol, who was separated from his mother, never to see her again. That made me think of Yevhen, a father who was detained while his children were sent to Moscow boarding facility. As a mother, I cannot even begin to imagine the horror of taking children away from their homes, putting them into camps, and indoctrinating them. We cannot bring back the children who have already lost their lives in the war, but we can and we must do even more to bring all the deported Ukrainian children home. This summit also allows us to once again establish some basic facts. Crimea is Ukraine, Donetsk is Ukraine, Luhansk is Ukraine, Kherson is Ukraine, and Zaporizhzhia is Ukraine. And let me be clear, Sweden will not recognize Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea or any other part of Ukraine's territory. We will not reward aggression. We owe this to the Ukrainian people, especially those in the temporarily occupied territories. We owe this to the women and the men who bravely fight for their freedom and for ours. We owe this to every person in Ukraine and beyond who believes in a world governed by rules rather than force. What we know about life under Russian occupation also shows why our support for free and independent Ukraine must continue. Because in the occupied territories, journalists are silenced, families are separated, children grow up under relentless propaganda. Crimean Tatars face harassment and imprisonment for speaking their language or for practicing their faith. Intimidation, fear, repression, this is life in the occupied territories. Russia's war of aggression causes immense human suffering. Those responsible must be held to account to secure justice for the victims and to deter potential perpetrators in the future. Since 2014, Sweden supports investigations and the documentation of suspected war crimes in Ukraine. We commend the work done by Ukrainian authorities and international mechanisms, including the International Criminal Court, the UN, the OSCE, and civil society organizations. Their efforts are crucial to end impunity. This year, we have seen important landmarks for accountability. In November, a court in Ukraine convicted a Russian soldier for murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment in Ukraine. This was the first ruling of its kind since Russia began its full-scale invasion. The Swedish government also strongly welcomes the progress that has been made towards establishing a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine and a claims commission for reparations. They must now begin their work as soon as possible. As Russia's brutal war of aggression enters its fourth winter, I'm urging international partners to help strengthen Ukraine by providing substantial military and civilian support. Last week at the EU Foreign Affairs Council in Brussels, I showed my colleagues a simple graph that showed how the EU's support to Ukraine is still smaller than the collective purchase of Russian oil and gas since the full-scale invasion. This is nothing but a disgrace. This needs to change now. The best way to fund Ukraine's needs now is to move forward with the reparations loan. As the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said in her State of the Union speech earlier this year, and I quote, "This is Russia's war, and Russia should be the one to pay," end quote. Once again, let me assure you, Sweden will continue to stand with Ukraine, with those who uphold international law, and with those who seek a just and lasting peace. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister, for your contribution and for setting a constructive tone for our discussions today. Distinguished delegates, I now have the honor of opening the plenary session of the 4th Parliamentary Summit of the International Crimea Platform. Before welcoming our next speaker, let me start with a few housekeeping remarks to guide us through today's session. Our session will run until 11 o'clock, when we will take a 30-minute coffee break. We will reconvene at 11:30 and continue until 14:15, a quarter past 2, when we will conclude the session with the adoption of a joint statement. The final version of the statement will be distributed during the plenary session. We are delighted to have a substantial list of speakers today. Accordingly, I kindly remind all delegates that speaking time is limited to 3 minutes, and in Sweden, 3 minutes means 3 minutes, that is 180 seconds. I know that in some countries 3 minutes might mean more, but it does not in Sweden. The order of speakers has been distributed to you. Please note that changes to the list are not possible at this stage. Some speakers have requested to speak earlier in the program due to early departures. We have accommodated this, so there are a few exceptions to the alphabetical speaking order. All statements are made from the lectern, where the microphone is automatically activated when you are given the floor. To ensure that the program runs smoothly, a designated seat has been reserved in the front row for the next speaker. If you are scheduled to speak next, please proceed to this seat. And it is just over there. Our first speaker will be the host of the first parliamentary summit, Mr. Gordan Jandrokovic, the Speaker of the Croatian Sabor. Mr. Jandrokovic will be followed by Jiri Drahos from the Czech Republic. Please, Mr. Jandrokovic, the floor is yours.
Dear Andreas, dear Ruslan, Madam Minister, esteemed colleagues. 3 years ago in Zagreb, at the first parliamentary summit of the International Crimea Platform, we stood together in affirming Ukraine's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity, in condemning Russian aggression in the strongest terms. We did the same in Prague and Riga. Today, I thank the Swedish Riksdag and the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine for gathering us here to reaffirm our dedication to these principles. To stand resolutely for international law so heavily violated by Russia in Ukraine, by suppression, terror and destruction, by temporary occupation and then illegal annexation. The idea that borders can be changed by force is extremely dangerous. It implies a vision of a world where the power of rules yields before the rule of power. To oppose this and to defend the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity is not only our duty. At a critical juncture, it is essential for global security. All the more reason to follow, with extreme attention, the talks regarding the latest US proposal for ending the war. Strong pressure on Russia needs to be maintained and increased, because Ukraine's approach has been nothing but cooperative and constructive. Comments just made by Chairman Stefanchuk and President Zelensky confirm that our undiminished support is as necessary as ever. Dear colleagues, from day one, Russian aggression has also been an attack on the sovereign right of every state to choose its own political path. In Croatia, we really understand the cost of defending a nation's political choices and of facing an aggressor which refuses to accept them. That too is why we have stood with Ukraine from the very start, with any means of support that we could provide, political, financial, humanitarian or military. On top of that, we have shared the highly specific expertise from our own war experience on demining, war crimes, prosecution, veterans' care and peaceful reintegration. Finally, I believe that our common values are defended in Ukraine today. So supporting Ukraine also means protecting these values and investing into a safer and more predictable future for all of us. Therefore, it is absolutely vital that we remain firmly behind them to advocate their rightful claims, to keep their needs high on our agendas, to have their best interest in our minds and in our hearts. Thank you, and God bless the brave people of Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. Jandrokovic. I now warmly welcome Mr. Yuri Dragos, the first Vice President of the Senate of the Parliament of the Czech Republic that hosted the second parliamentary summit. Mr. Dragos will be followed by Ms. Daiga Mireni.
Dear Andreas, dear Ruslan, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to be part of the fourth Crimea Platform Parliamentary Summit and to represent the Senate of the Parliament of the Czech Republic here. It has been more than 3.5 years since the start of the full-scale and unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine, a conflict that has claimed thousands of lives and in which Russia commits war crimes every day, for which I believe it will one day bear full criminal responsibility. In reaction, some European and non-European politicians argue that peace must be achieved at any cost, including handing Crimea over to Vladimir Putin, who will then, presumably, start behaving himself again. Nothing could be farther from the truth. We Czechs have historical experience with such dictators. When Neville Chamberlain returned from the Munich conference in 1938, he brought the British a supposed peace for our time. However, Nazi Germany was not satisfied with gaining the Sudetenland, and after occupying the rest of Czechoslovakia, the worst conflict in modern history broke out within a year. Let us therefore not fall for the Chamberlains of today. There can be no peace that the Ukrainians themselves do not want and negotiate. Until then, it's our moral imperative to support this heroic nation to the best of our individual countries' abilities and within the European Union as a whole. Whether this means humanitarian aid to suffering civilians, material support for Ukrainian infrastructure, or, of course, supplies of military equipment. In this regard, we in the Czech Senate will do our utmost to preserve the excellent Czech ammunition initiative. All of this will hopefully contribute to us passing the test of history, a test which our predecessors failed miserably when faced with the threat of Hitler. At that time, they had a choice between shame and war. They chose shame and got war. Let us not repeat the same mistake with another bloody dictator. As our first president, Václav Havel, once said, indifference to others and indifference to the fate of the whole is precisely what opens the door to evil. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Mr. Dragos. Our next speaker is the Speaker of Sejm of Latvia, Ms. Daiga Mireni. Her intervention will be followed by a video statement.
Ļoti cienījamais Ruslan, ļoti cienījamais Andreja. Visam drīz būs pagājuši 12 gadi kopš Krimas nelikumīgās okupācijas, bet nākamā gada februārī apritēs 4 gadi kopš mēs katrs kļuvām par lieciniekiem brutālam agresoru valsts pilna mēroga iebrukumam Ukrainā. Katra Eiropas politiķa pienākums šodien ir nerimstoši turpināt atgādināt par Krimas nelikumīgo okupāciju. Šodien katrs no mums var būt Krimas balss, turpinot izgaismot cilvēktiesību pārkāpumus, nelikumīgās deportācijas,
Please use the channel extra.
Piespiedu izmaiņas Krimas iedzīvotāju struktūrā un represijas pret Krimas tatāriem. Katrs no mums ir liecinieks nerimstošai vardarbībai un Krimas pussalas militarizācijai. Baltijas valstis padomju okupācijā pavadīja 50 smagus gadus. Tika pielietoti visi instrumenti, lai mēs zaudētu savu valodu, kultūru un identitāti. Padomju okupācijas sekas turpinājām izjust arī šodien. Divvalodība, etniskais naids, dezinformācija un hibrīdkara elementi. Mēs Baltijas valstis ļoti labi apzināmies, cik neparedzamas un bīstams spēj būt agresors. Nemainās arī viņa metodes, tāpēc mēs turpināsim uzstājīgi atgādināt, kā Eiropai, tā arī visai pasaulei, Krievija ir nemainīgs apdraudējums mums visiem. Kam vēl būtu jānotiek, lai mēs Eiropā pilnībā apzinātos situācijas nopietnību? Šis ir brīdis, kur mums īpaši Eiropas parlamentu līderiem ir jāspēj darīt vairāk. Nepieciešams mobilizēt nacionālos parlamentus un valdības, lai atbalsts Ukrainai būtu lielāks un piespiestu agresoru sēsties pie sarunu galda. Ukrainā ikdienas dzīvību zaudē nevainīgi cilvēki. Gan kaujas laukā, gan arī aizstāvot un stiprinot demokrātiju. Mēs Eiropā vēl joprojām varam darīt vairāk, un vēl līdz galam mēs neesam izdarījuši arī savu mājas darbu. Krievijas iesaldētie
Russia's frozen assets are yet to be channeled into direct support for Ukraine. At the same time, trade with the aggressor state is continuing, and there are still industries and areas where sanctions can be stepped up. And dear colleagues, we need to use all international legal instruments to ensure that Russia and its officials are held accountable for the crimes perpetrated against the people of Ukraine and especially its children. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you, Ms. Mirania. Dear colleagues, we will now see a video message by Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the United States. Please look on the screen.
Good afternoon. This is Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson from Washington. I really wish I could be in Stockholm with you this week, but I'm so grateful to my dear friends, Speaker Andreas Norlen, Speaker Ruslan Stefanchuk, for inviting me to briefly address you today. I was fortunate to visit with my friend Speaker Stefanchuk most recently at the G7 Speakers Summit this fall in Ottawa. And I'd love to see each of you next time you come to Washington, D.C. I'm a little biased, but the view from my speaker's balcony down the National Mall is the best in town, and I'd love to have you come by. I'm really grateful that 60 parliamentary delegations have gathered to discuss such a topic important as this. Russia's flagrant and devastating attacks on the innocent people of Ukraine are unacceptable, and the principles of territorial integrity and state sovereignty are not up for debate. We're thankful to our allies in Europe, but also across the world, for stepping up their support to Ukraine, including tougher sanctions on Moscow and strengthening energy security through American LNG to free Europe from Russian leverage. Despite the vast physical distance between the U.S. and Ukraine, the Ukrainian people's fight for freedom and survival inspires us all. As the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, we will continue to work together with President Trump, Republican and Democrat leaders in our Congress, and our European allies to help restore peace and prosperity for the Ukrainian people. After ending conflicts across the globe, from the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific to Africa, President Trump has demonstrated that he is determined to end wars and stop the needless bloodshed. We understand that peace cannot be achieved through weakness. Peace is secured through strength. And it is this principle that guides the new American foreign policy under President Trump's leadership. And we're prayerful that these international efforts will bring about a just and lasting peace for our friends in Ukraine. Again, I lament that I cannot join you this weekend in Stockholm in person, but I wish you a productive and fruitful discussion, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to address you. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Muchísimas gracias, señor presidente. Y ahora vamos a continuar. De acuerdo a la lista, tengo aquí apuntado al señor Vincent Blondel, presidente del Senado belga. Y lo seguirá después la señora Raya Nazarian.
Honourable speakers of the
estimados presidentes, estimados invitados, señor presidente, excelencia, distinguidos indicados. Hace 7 meses atrás yo estaba en Kiev con varios de ustedes, incluyendo también Andreas Norlen y el señor Stefanchuk, y ahí pudimos evidenciar cuáles fueron las atrocidades que se cometieron en Bucha. Y ciertamente lo que vimos ahí quedó grabado en nuestras mentes. Yo dejé Kiev mucho más convencido que nunca que este tipo de crímenes no puede quedar impune. Hace pocos días atrás, la ciudad de Ternopil también sufrió un ataque violento. Y en nombre del Senado belga, ciertamente expreso nuestra solidaridad incondicional y también les hago llegar nuestros sentimientos más queridos a toda la gente de la región que está defendiendo su patria. También nos acordamos de los desplazados y aquellos que perdieron todo. La agresión rusa contra Ucrania es algo más que un desafío geopolítico. Es un desafío muy profundo que toca la seguridad europea, también toca sanciones colectivas y valores compartidos. Crimea también es una parte integral de Ucrania y condenamos fehacientemente a Rusia que intentó
territory which violates the UN Charter. We condemn the horrific use of torture, inhumane treatment and abduction. Accountability is essential. We will continue to support international investigation of war crimes. Russia must be held responsible and pay for the devastation it caused. And let us be clear, Ukraine must be at the very center of all peace effort. Any discussion concerning its future must be conducted with the Ukrainian people to lay the foundation of a just and lasting peace. Dear colleagues, let me conclude with a more personal note. 30 years ago, I became engaged here in Stockholm to the woman who is still my wife today. It happened on the Riksbron bridge, just outside this Riksdag building, a memory that remains very dear to me. I hope to be able to return to this same bridge very soon, once Ukraine has regained its full sovereignty in a world that respects the international order. Today, let us reaffirm our commitment to working together to safeguard the rule-based international order. Let us advance with unity and determination towards the establishment of a comprehensive, just and lasting peace for Ukraine and for the world. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our next speaker is Ms. Raya Nazaryan, Speaker of the Bulgarian National Assembly. After her remarks, we will hear from Mr. Lauri Huzar. Please, Ms. Nazaryan, the floor is yours. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the 4th year of Russia's illegal, unjust, and unprovoked military aggression against Ukraine. We will not forget and will always repeat. This war did not start on the 24th of February 2022, but with Kremlin's annexation of Crimea in 2014. Russia's illegal occupation and annexation of parts of sovereign Ukrainian lands is a violation of international law. Their Ukrainian territories and their return is a matter not only of rule of law and international legal principles, but of justice too. Bulgaria has been and will be a reliable and active partner in the International Crimea Platform since it was founded in 2021. We participate in the parliamentary sessions and contribute to the initiatives for the security of the Black Sea region, including the forum we held in Sofia in 2024 that brought together delegations from 42 states and 8 international organizations. In the context of developments in the past few days, I would like to welcome the renewed effort of our partners in the US and President Trump to seek a way to stop the military actions in Ukraine. The 28-point plan has elements of fundamental importance for achieving lasting and just peace. However, the proposals should be discussed in coordination with all European partners because the conditions of a future peace agreement have a direct impact on the security not only of Ukraine, but also of Bulgaria, the European Union, and Europe as a whole. The Republic of Bulgaria confirms its commitment to work hard within the EU and NATO with our American partners in order to guarantee, together with Ukraine, that any agreement will be sustainable, will be implemented in good faith, and that Ukraine will have security guarantees. Ukrainian people have the sovereign right to define their own future and to decide on the nature of any proposed peace agreement. Dear colleagues, our common goal is a peaceful and sustainable development of the region. Recovery is no longer a future ambition, but a present need. The European path of Ukraine is a choice that is in line with the interest of both the Ukrainian people and the European Union. A stable, independent, and democratic Ukraine is an important factor for the security and prosperity of our continent. In conclusion, please let me send a message to the people of Ukraine once again. You are not alone in these difficult times. Bulgaria stands by you in trials, in striving for peace, and in hope for a future of freedom, dignity, and security. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now invite Mr. Lauri Huszar, President of Estonia, Riigikogu, to deliver his remarks. You have 3 minutes. Next will be Mr. Marcos Perestrello. Please proceed, Mr. Huszar.
Distinguished colleagues, dear Ruslan, dear Andreas, allow me to begin by expressing my deep gratitude for bringing us together today. The Crimean Platform is not merely an event. It is a testimony to our shared commitment to freedom, to peace, and to human dignity. At this moment in history, our decision bears consequences not only for Ukraine, but for the very fate of all Europeans. Ukraine has continuously shown that it is serious about peace, and President Zelensky remains ready to negotiate. It is crucial that Europe, Ukraine, and the United States work together with the goal of a just and lasting peace. A peace grounded in international law and fully respecting Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. Peace cannot be attained by appeasements. History tells us that bowing to aggression does not quiet the storm. It invites the next and even bigger one. Dear colleagues, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, and nothing about Europe without Europe. Russia's demands must not be legitimized and under any circumstances. Europe will never recognize claims that extend Russia's influence beyond its borders. And talks must begin with an immediate ceasefire. Any agreement must focus on ending the war, securing Ukraine's future, and providing credible security guarantees backed by the real forces. Ukraine must retain the right to choose its own path, whether towards the European Union or NATO. There must be no impunity for crimes committed. The deported children of Ukraine must be returned home. The aggressor must pay. Frozen Russian assets must become a real instrument of Ukraine's defense, justice, and reconstruction. In the European Union alone, these assets exceed 200 billion euros. Let's start using them. Dear colleagues, Russia's war of aggression and the peace that follows will shape Europe's security architecture for generations to come. Let Europe stand united and resolute, ensuring that peace honors Ukraine's courage and rests upon justice, law, and lasting security. If territories can be gained and borders changed by force, no one is secure. To prevent such a future, we must continue and strengthen our steadfast support for Ukraine, and firm pressure on Russia. And let me be completely honest with you, Russia never changes. Dear friends, together, through principled pressure and unwavering solidarity, we stand firmly with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you. I now give the floor to Mr. Marcos Prestrello, President of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly and Deputy Speaker of the Portuguese Assembleia. After his remarks, we will hear from Mr. Jussi Halla-aho.
Mr. Speaker, Excellencies, on behalf of both the Portuguese Parliament and the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, let me express my gratitude to the Swedish Parliament for the invitation and for hosting this summit. Portugal has long stood with Ukraine, and in the Portuguese Parliament, cross-party majorities have consistently reaffirmed Ukraine's sovereignty and condemned Russia's aggression. We've been active in bringing Ukraine's case to partners across the global south, underlining the universal principles at stake: rule of law, multilateralism, sovereignty, territorial integrity, respect for human rights. These are not only European concerns, but also the very foundation of the international order. Excellencies, in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, representatives from all 32 national parliaments of NATO members have stood shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine since the very beginning of Russia's aggression. We were one of the first international institutions to expel the Russian delegation after the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. And since the full-scale invasion in 2022, we have not only reaffirmed our support, we have doubled down, including by creating a special fund to support the Verkhovna Rada participation in the NATO PA. We are following closely the ongoing discussion around the possible ceasefire and political settlement. This is the occasion to reiterate that our Assembly fully supports efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace, one that ensures a free, sovereign, and prosperous future for Ukraine, that guarantees Ukraine's and Europe's long-term security, and that does not reward aggression but deters it. This is only possible if negotiations are carried out with the maximum participation of Ukraine. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. The outcome of any negotiations on Ukraine will set a precedent with global repercussions. We can have no illusions. Russia is and will remain a threat to NATO and Euro-Atlantic security. Any potential political settlement must lead to an end of its pattern of aggressive behavior. The NATO PA supports peace through strength. The best way to get to peace tomorrow is to support Ukraine's defense today. A capable Ukraine army is a precondition to deterring future aggression, along with solid security guarantees that we need to provide. This is why the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has strongly urged allies to step up defense spending and to ramp up military support, including through Pearl. Mr. Speaker of the Verkhovna Rada, let me conclude by expressing the NATO PA